I just recorded a long video and it didn't record. Hey! Well, welcome back, guys. This is the Late Firestarter, and let's try this again. I'm the Late Firestarter, which means I started late in life with this fire journey. What does it mean to start fire? It doesn't mean I'm taking two sticks and rubbing them together and trying to win Survivor. That's not what it means at all. I'm not starting fires. No. I'm from LA in California. You do not want to ever get anyone on tape thinking you start fires, because then I'd have all these FBI people at my house or police, and no. It's not about that. It's just about these two things. It's about the FI and the RE. FI stands for financial independence. RE stands for retire early. Put them together, it's FIRE. And fire starters are people who start the journey on fire. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm on my journey to financial independence, retire early, and I'm a late fire starter. So I started later in life, which means the retire early is not as important to me, although I think I still will retire early. If you retire at 58, that's retiring early, right? But normally in the fire community, people are retiring in their 30s. I don't have that luxury, but the financial independence is something that's really key. And so I really want to have that financial independence, because to me, financial independence is freedom. It's freedom from your job. It's freedom from where you live. It's freedom from your situation. If you want to travel for 3 years, you have freedom to do that. If you want to buy an RV and live in that and go around the States, you can do that. If you want to change jobs and take a part-time job, you can do that. Fire is freedom. And so that's really what I'm after. It's about the flexibility and the freedom. But when you think about that financial independence really requires two things. It requires passive income, and it requires the ability to get paid somehow other than from a job. It requires the ability to have that income come into your life. And there's the side of it of getting your spending down. So your spending needs to come down because it makes financial independence a lot more accessible. For example, if my financial need, if what I need to live off of every year is $300,000, well then when I leave my job, when I get to financial independence, and when I get in that RV and I leave, or when I go to Europe and I travel, I need to have access to $300,000 every year from my investments or from my passive income, and that's a lot of money. On the other hand, if what I can live off is $50,000 a year, well, all of a sudden now, all I need to do is access $50,000 from my investment accounts or from my dividends or from my rental incomes or whatever it may be. And so that's obviously a lot more doable. So that's me. I'm the late fire starter. When it comes to lowering your spending and getting your costs down, I have another channel called The Cheap Guy, and that's really all about saving money and all about getting deals. And so I'm going to put that in the notes. Go check that out as well. So The Cheap Guy's about saving you money. The late fire starter is about coming along my journey on how I get to financial independence, primarily using rental income and dividend investing income. And so those are my two passive sources of income that I plan on living off of. Today, what I wanted to talk to you about was a Roth IRA. I wanted to talk about why I haven't invested in a Roth before, why I'm investing now, and what are maybe some of the pros and cons of these different retirement accounts. And I may do that actually in reverse order now that I think about it. But anyways, we're going to talk about retirement accounts and Roth. And before I do, make sure and subscribe to this channel to follow along my journey. And hit like, because you know what? It's the season of giving, and I could use that like a lot. Roth IRAs are basically a form of IRA. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. A Roth IRA is a specific type of retirement account. All retirement accounts, there's many different flavors, they have two things in common. One is they all have a tax advantage, and two, they have a delayed ability to withdraw from those accounts. All of them say you have to wait until you're in your 60s during retirement age before you can start drawing money from these accounts. The tax advantage comes in two different flavors. Majority of retirement accounts, and when I say majorities, I mean the IRA, which is the individual retirement account, the 401k, which is through your workplace, the 403b if you work for a nonprofit. There's different plans if you're a teacher or if you're a government employee. The HSA, health savings account, if you have a low premium healthcare insurance plan, you can invest in an HSA, which is honestly very similar to a 401k. It's very similar to any other retirement account because you can use it as a retirement account once you get a certain age to withdraw, but it's even better because you can use it for medical expenses in the meantime. Anyways, all of these accounts, all of these retirement accounts, their main tax advantage is you save money on taxes now. What I mean by that is, if I make $1,000 in a paycheck, I take that $1,000, put it in my bank account, and I get taxed now, this year, on that $1,000. Why? Because that $1,000 is my income and I get paid income tax. So $1,000 goes into my pool, into my pot, of all the money that I'm going to get taxed on at the end of the year. That is my income tax. And how much is in that pot determines how much income tax I pay. There are ways to divvy that money up so that only some of it gets into my pot. What I mean by that is I get a $1,000 paycheck, but I put $500 of that paycheck into my 401k. What that does is it means instead of putting $1,000 into my pot that gets taxed, I'm only putting $500 into my pot that gets taxed. So if you think about it, if I did this every single check, I would be getting taxed on half my income because I'm taking half my income and I'm putting it into my 401k. Now that of course assumes that I can live off half my income, which some people can. And if you can, great. And if you can't, then check out the cheap guy. Anyways, so that's how a 401k, that's how an IRA, that's how an HSA, that's how a 403b, that's how all these retirement accounts work is I save money now. I save on taxes now. I put less money into my taxable bucket and I take the other money and I put it into this other account that I can't touch till I'm in my 60s. And so it's sitting over here, but it's tax-free income until I'm in my 60s. And once I start taking that money out of the 401k or out of the HSA or out of the 403b or out of the IRA, that money now, just like that original 1,000 or even the 500, that money goes into my income tax pot. That is now income that I have to pay taxes on. So a 401k, I save on taxes now, but I pay taxes later. In the 80s, along came this thing called the Roth IRA, named after a guy named Roth. And what it does is it reverses the tax advantage. So with the Roth, what I do is I take that $1,000 and I get taxed on it. And then I take my 500 of that 1,000 and I put it into a Roth. Now, I didn't save any taxes this year. I'm still getting taxed on that $500 this year that I'm putting into my Roth IRA. That Roth IRA can gain interest. Boom, it's all tax-free, just like the 401k. It's earning dividends, it's earning interest over time, and I'm not getting taxed on that. The 401k, eventually I do get taxed on when I withdraw it. The Roth IRA, however, whenever I take money from that, when I'm in my 60s, I start drawing money from my Roth IRA, that is tax-free income. So if I'm drawing $30,000 from my 401k and $10,000 from my Roth IRA in retirement, I'm getting taxed on $30,000 because that $10,000 from my Roth IRA is tax-free. So Roth IRA, pay tax now, save tax later. 401k, save tax now, pay tax later. So that's the main difference. The other differences are how much you can contribute. All of them have a max. You can't put $1 million into a 401k or a Roth or any of these things. They have a max amount that you can put aside. And a 401k, you can put a lot more money than a Roth. Right now in 2020, for a single individual, a Roth IRA maximum contribution for the year is $6,000. So if I put $6,000 into a Roth every year, obviously that's not going to be enough money for me to live off if I plan on retiring in 10 years. But any other interest or dividends or money that Roth IRA makes over time will be tax-free when I choose to tap into that. The main reason I haven't used a Roth IRA up to this point are really two reasons. I haven't invested a ton into any retirement accounts. I do have a 401k, but even that, I don't max it out. I basically just meet my employer's matching amount. The employer matches 2.5%. I think I contribute 3%. So my employer puts in 2.5% and another 3%. So altogether, I'm getting 8.5%, 3% of which is actually my money. So my 401k has never been a huge focus of my retirement life. Why? Because I'm going after financial independence, and I want to be able to have the flexibility to use that money anytime I want. I don't want to wait until I'm in my 60s to go ahead and be able to start living free. I want to live free now. I want to live free 10 years from now. I don't want to be tied down. So I don't like having things tied down. I do not like having things inaccessible. And yes, there are ways you can do it with penalties. There's ways you can try to do it without penalties. But for the most part, I don't count that money as money that I have. It's bonus. It's bonus money in my 60s. If everything blows up and it goes wrong, then I have that to maybe live off of. The reason I haven't invested in Roth IRAs before this point is because of my political ideology, and not because I'm against them. I don't mean that at all. But what I mean is I'm into public policy. I got my degree in political science. I'm in just all into this thing. And so one of the things that I desire for our country, for our economic policy, is that we would move to a national consumption tax, national sales tax, fair tax, some people call it. The idea is that we would get away from income tax. I don't want to tax income. I just want income to be free from taxes, and I want us to tax what we spend. The main two reasons I'm into that is because I don't want to hinder making money, and I want to incentivize saving. In other words, incentivize lower spending. And, national sales tax, in my opinion, would be a healthier way to go about raising money for our country. With that said, there have been different election cycles where the idea of a national sales tax replacing the income tax has been really popular. And in those times, I thought, if I put money in a Roth and all I do is make that money inaccessible, so that I can have tax-free income later. And when later comes, we don't have income tax, we've moved to a national sales tax, well, then all I did was lock my money up for no gain at all. In other words, the advantage I have of putting my money in a Roth is wiped out if we ever get rid of income tax. The other reason it might not work for me is because let's say I'm only making $30,000 in my retirement income between my different retirement accounts. Let's say that's all I need to live off of is $30,000. Well, if I'm only making $30,000, I'm getting taxed way less in retirement than I am now. So it would make a lot more sense to use the tax advantage now, not later. And depending on the income tax brackets and rules, if I'm only making $30,000, or if I'm living overseas and therefore I'm not paying taxes on my money at all, then the whole Roth IRA thing just didn't work for me. On the other hand, it does seem like income tax isn't going anywhere, and it might be a good idea to just have some money in a Roth that in the event that when I'm in my 60s and I retire, it could be really handy. I don't know. To me, it's not the end all be all. I also haven't maxed out on a lot of other retirement accounts, mostly because I just have never paid that much in taxes. I pay too much in taxes anyway. Everybody does, but I've never been a huge high income earner. And so for a lot of people, tax avoidance is the biggest thing they can focus on. It would save them the most money is if they really learn tax avoidance, if they really learn ways, legal ways to avoid paying taxes. And that is why very wealthy people spend a lot of money trying to save on taxes. I've never been super wealthy. I don't make a ton of money. And so really focusing on these huge tax advantages isn't the way to go for me. I'm not really going to benefit that much from that. So I do want to take advantage of these things, but it's not my main strategy. The one thing that I was most excited about was the health savings account, because that is basically like a 401k in the sense that I can invest the money and make interest, and it's tax-free now. I'm taking that money out of my income pot this year. I really like that. But I can use that account for health expenses. And so in a sense, it's accessible to me. I would love it, honestly, if I could put all my 401k, Roth money, if I could put it all into an HSA, I would absolutely do that. Because it's the best of both worlds. It is tax savings now, it's retirement income, and in between, if I need that money for medical expenses, I can do that. And so to just have that huge lump sum there as my medical insurance in my financial independence retired world would be awesome. And then I could take that money item out of what I need to live off of my plate and then live off that. Most of my investments have been in a taxable account. They are there for me. If I needed that money now, I have it. If I wanted to use that money to buy a house, I have it. If I wanted to retire in 5 years and live off the dividends, I can. No penalties, no hoops to run through, nothing to worry about. And I value that flexibility. I value that freedom. And so that's why most of my investments are in a taxable income account. But I did open a Roth account. I funded it. I didn't fund it fully. I put $4,000 into it. I will talk about all of that and what I bought and why in my video in January about my December dividend account. But bottom line is, when I make dividends in my taxable account, those dividends are part of my taxable income. Some of them are qualified dividends, which means I get paid at a 15% rate, but the ones that are non-qualified, so my REITs or my BDCs or other income accounts like QILD, those are income dividends. And so those dividends get put right into my income pot, and I get taxed based on how much is in my income pot. So earning dividends that aren't qualified, earning dividends that are high and would be taxed as income in my Roth was my strategy. So if you have any questions about any of these things, whether it's in individual retirement accounts, 401ks, Roths, if this wasn't clear to you, you have other ideas or other questions about retirement in general or tax advantage savings accounts, things like that, go ahead and put them in the comments below. If it's a really good idea, I'll make a video about it. If not, I'll definitely answer every single comment. I just would love to engage with you. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I would love it. It would be a great time because it's the giving season. Happy Christmas, as they say in England. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. May 2021 be way better than 2020, which wouldn't be too hard to do. This is just a great time to say, hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming along my journey. Let me know about your journey. And once again, go ahead and like this video. Check out the cheap guy.